Hi everyone, so today we're going to be focusing on painting Raptors. Now I'm going to be using some Horus Heresy Assault Marines to do this. This is just my Praetor that I kit bashed for my custom force. Very simple recipe, very muted colours. It's not overly complex to get this result, and it's quite quick to produce as well. It's going to be oils and enamels doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, and not a huge variety of paints that we're going to be using. No edge highlighting, a little bit of OSL. We're going to be using predominantly the airbrush to put down the base coats, some oils, and I'll show you how I finish my models as well. But we're just going to be using a basic Assault Marine today, just to show you the process. And all I've done in preparation is I've primed this guy black, and if you need a list of the paints that I'm going to use today, you can find them in the description. And yeah, let's get to it. So first paint I'm going to use is Azul Gris, dark blue grey from Vallejo. The reason I'm using a blue grey as the base is because it's going to contrast slightly with the green. It's also going to be our shadow colour, so I'm just going to put this across the whole model, including into the shadows, so up from above, up from underneath as well. Make sure the whole model is coated, and this is going to establish a really good base for the greens that we're going to layer up on top. Like so. The next paint we're going to use is German Tank Crew by Vallejo Model Color. Now this is a very military green, and what we're going to do, we're just going to apply this to the upward facing parts of the model, down to about just the mid of his shin pads there, leaving a bit more grey towards the bottom of the model. And the idea here is we want to draw attention up the sculpt and make sure that our highlights as they get brighter are getting focused closer and closer towards the shoulder pads and the head, just to draw the attention on the model for the future OSL that we're going to add later. So quite a broad highlight from above using this colour, and just make sure you hit all the upward facing parts of the model. Now on the shield I'm going to focus towards the top, leaving some grey towards the bottom of the model, but making sure that the top of the model is predominantly covered using this very military grey. But as you can see, I've left grey in the shadows, that blue grey, and also towards the bottom of the shin pads and feet there as well. Only a very thin coat of this colour to be added. And when you've got that result, you're ready to move on to the next stage. Now the next colour I'm going to use for the base coat is US Olive Drab, also from Vallejo Model Color. We're going to coat 2/3 of the model, making sure that we're only hitting really the upward facing parts of the model, so the centre of the head, the tops of the shoulder pads, the thighs there, the top of the chest, and we're just going to position it across the top of the shield as well, and backpack. So only the upward facing areas, and we're just getting tighter and tighter now with our highlights. With the shield, we're just going to start hitting just the top of the shield here, leaving that kind of blue-grey into the bottom. Okay, and once you've finished that step, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. So you can see that from below, we've still got that blue-grey in the shadows, but when we look down from above, we've got a predominantly opaque layer of that mid-tone all the way through the model. Okay, the next stage is we're going to be using Graugrun, which is another paint by AK. Bit of a strange one, but it gives a lovely highlight without it being overly vibrant. It's still quite a muted green, but it's just a really good one to use to get that kind of last little spot highlight in the places where we want to draw attention, but we don't want it to end up looking too vibrant and take away that kind of military feel. And all I'm going to do is hit the top of the helmet, the shoulder pads, just the little areas on top of the backpack, and a little bit towards the top of the shield there as well. Now be very gentle with this because we don't want to highlight this up too much. I'm just going to hit a little bit of the chest too. You can see I'm just hitting the tops of the backpack, tops of the shoulders, right in the center of the head. Now the next step here before we apply a gloss varnish, add the decals in preparation for the oil pin wash, is to use some red in the shadows, and we're going to be very subtle with this colour because we don't want it ending up looking a bit like a ripe apple, which you're in danger of making this marine look like. But what happens is, although when this red is applied it looks quite bright, the oils are really going to knock it back into this kind of deeper, rusty looking red. And for this red, I'm using an AK color called Wine Red. It's a very strong red. I'm using thinner, maybe 10:1 in my airbrush. And I'm just going to be putting this in at a few little spots that are in the shadow or in areas where I just want to create a bit of contrast. And again, we're just playing with a bit of color theory here, so it's going to contrast really well with the green. And as I said, once we put the enamels and oil washes on, it's going to bring out the red and make a kind of really rusty red in the shadows, which is going to make the marine, give the marine a little bit more interest. So being very careful with this, as I said, very thin, and we're just going to hit a few little spots. So aiming just at the underneath the chest plate there, we're just in the inside of the leg. On the shield, just going to hit the very tip of the bottom of the shield there, just like that. Now for the shoulder pads, I've obviously hit this one on the left here in the shadow, but I'm also going to hit this one here just on the edge there, just to add a little bit of interest. And I'm going to do the same thing on the back. So this leg on the right, just where it's in shadow, add a little bit there, a little bit behind the tip of the pauldron there, and on the back of the arm and inside of the leg. Now you can see this is very, very subtle, so do be careful, take your time, thin this quite substantially, because as I said, it is a very bright red. You can use inks here if you've got a red ink, but I would say try and use one that is not going to be too heavily pigmented. As I said, this is a very vibrant red, and I've used a very thin mixture here, so you want this kind of result. Okay, so I have varnished the model, I've applied the decals, and I've just varnished again with some polyurethane gloss varnish from Vallejo, and this is the result so far. So as you can see, we've applied a couple of coats of varnish now, and that red in the shadows has kind of become this almost like rusty looking red, which I really like the effect that it gives. And again, it just gives it a little bit of contrast there to the rest of the green. It's also knocked down the green a little bit, but we've still got the blue-grey in the shadows there, which is again contrasting with the green and just creating interest. Now I love decals. I know some people prefer to do freehand, but I think there's no better way than to elevate an army project quickly than by applying some decals. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to do a little pin wash with some oils. So I'm using Abteilung 502 burnt umber, and I've just mixed this very thinly with some fast drying mineral spirits, so not very thick at all. And we're just going to go around the model, just hitting the recesses. So around the helmet, inside the little kind of neck guard, get it into the little rivets in the shoulder pads, through the hands, etc. We're going to be adding the parts of the model that are in black, like the little holders to the jetpack later, and we're going to be doing the metallics in the next step too. So this is just to make a real nice foundation and give it a little bit of definition to the model. And yeah, we'll just go around and just tap this into all of the places where we want that kind of dirt and grime build up to be. With the gloss varnish and capillary action, it'll just run into the recesses, so we won't need to do too much here, but I'm literally just touching the model in the places where I want the varnish to flood into, and as that dries it's going to give this lovely kind of build up of dirt and grime effect on the miniature. Okay, so I've let the oils dry for about an hour and a half, and I've come back, so I don't have to worry about reactivating anything or the oil interfering with the paints that I'm about to use. But as you can see, it's all kind of dried into the recesses now. We've got this lovely kind of dusty, muddy look in all the cracks and crevices. Now, I did notice that there is a little bit of clean up just behind the leg here, so I'm just gonna simply wipe it away with a little cotton bud like so, and you can do that for anywhere where the oil has kind of gone over a little bit. It should just come straight off. If you're having any difficulties or the oil has been drying for a bit of time, you can always use a little bit of mineral spirit as well. The next stage we're going to use Fanatics War Paint Matte Black, but any black will do, just to do the strapping between the jetpack and his shoulders. And then we're going to block out the chainsword and any of the metals with Vallejo model color, metal color, and this is Jet Exhaust. Now, this is a very kind of runny metallic paint. It's got excellent coverage, but it's just important, firstly, not to use a wet palette, because this paint likes to split very quickly, especially when it's on a wet palette with extra water, but also not to load the brush too heavily, because it does tend to flow into recesses if there's too much on the brush. So I'm going to go away and paint in the chainsword and metallics, and also that strapping off camera, and we'll be back once that's completed. Okay, so we've blocked in the metallics. This metal has excellent coverage, so it should only take 1 or 2 passes to get a really good coverage on all the metallic parts. We're getting to pretty much the end of the process. Now, because I'm army painting, I am not going to black out all the ribbing on the armor. If you want to do this, you're more than welcome to, but I just have, if it looks good from, 5 feet away, or, from the other side of the table, I am happy at this level. I think it looks excellent, especially when you've got a full squad. So look, if you do want to spend the extra time to go in and do the ribbing, you're more than welcome to. I think because it's quite a kind of a washed out kind of green, and it's a bit dirty anyway, it's not really necessary, but that's completely up to you. Now, we're going to be taking an enamel liquid pigment next, and this is going to be the last kind of pin wash that we do, and this is AK Wargames Enamel Liquid Pigment Dark Rust Dust. Try saying that 3 times really quickly, but this stuff is fantastic, and it has this really lovely rusty red colour here. Now, I've thinned this down with a little bit of mineral spirits too, so because it is a enamel pigment, it does separate, but don't worry too much about that, because we're going to apply it very lightly to the metallics, but we're also going to, over the top of where we pin washed, we're going to apply a little bit extra into those recesses too. And what you'll find is, because of this red colour, it's going to contrast really nicely with the green, and like you can see with a model that's already completed, you get this lovely build up of kind of rust and grime on top of the metallics and between the armour plates, and it makes the green armour just pop that little bit more. So that's the next stage. Okay, so we're almost at the end of the process. I've just given this a whole spray with the airbrush with satin varnish, and it just helps unify the whole model. I've started to use more satin than matte now because I just like the vibrancy that it keeps in the colours. You still get all that tonal variation, and it looks really great in natural light on the gaming board when you use a satin, in my opinion. But just a coat of that brings everything together. The next part of the miniature, we're just going to block in the eyes, and we're going to do some soft lens glow. So we're going to use turquoise. So I'm just going to take some turquoise and just very carefully block in the lenses. And it's okay if we go a little bit over the bottom here, because we're going to give the appearance that the lens is actually glowing, which is going to look fantastic. Now you can choose to have the lenses glowing more than this if you want. I'm not a big fan of the super, exposed highlight on the rest of the mask here. I want to keep this one quite subtle, and I actually want to draw more attention to the one that I'm going to do on the chest plate in a moment. So I'm just going to finish these eyes base coating, and then we'll go on to highlighting. Okay, so all I've done here is taken some turquoise, based the eye lens, and then in the center I've used 50% turquoise, 50% ice yellow, and I've also applied the same mix to the bottom of the lens as well. The final stage here is just to use some AK Fluorescent Blue, watered down, probably 3 parts water to 1 part Fluorescent Blue, and we're just going to wash that now into the eye. And this is just going to help the eye now pop. Okay, so what you can see here, I've just done a little puff of the white ink around those buttons. I'm now just going to apply a very thin little coat of the turquoise. And the next step is going to be taking some of that ice yellow and just going over those little nodules or whatever they are. I have no idea. If you do know what they are, let me know in the comments, because I'd be keen to understand. But anyway, I'm just going to go over those with the ice yellow. Once that's done, I'm going to take the watered down Fluorescent Blue and just wash that over the whole area. Into this recess here. Okay, like so. I'm going to wait for that to dry, and then I'm going to go back in and just re-establish those buttons or lights again with the ice yellow, just for the final stage of the highlight. Okay, and this is the finished model ready for action. So I've just popped him on his base. If you do want to see a basing video in future, let me know. But pretty simple, just a few printed bits and milliput and gravel, blacked out rim. But yeah, I think he looks fantastic. And just to give him a bit of an understanding of what he looks like in a squad, so this is the squad I've already done. And as you can see, once they're all in their squad together, I think they look great. But please let me know your thoughts. I hope you found this video helpful. Sometimes I'm unsure whether they should be a bit longer and go into a bit more detail, but I don't like to paint in too much of a complicated way, and I do focus on army painting. So for me, it's about getting models on the tabletop as quickly as possible, but at a looking as good as they could possibly look. So Thanks for watching. As I said, I hope you learned something. Feel free to reach out and request anything else that you'd like to see or go into a bit more detail about. And yeah, thanks very much.